The last option is a follow-up to any existing article, and I want you in this case to actually pick something that wasn't created this semester. So that means any article that's been published on the Yellow Jacket website before the start of spring 2020. So, for example, there was a story at last semester on the women's soccer facing Adelphi, and this was in the regular season. Then they beat Adelphi at the quarterfinals, and that sent them to the semifinals. So you could have a follow-up story that recapped women's soccer's season, their win over Adelphi in the quarterfinals, but then unfortunately they lost in the semifinals. Your objectives here, I want you to, similar to the first one, work on integrating direct and indirect quotes, but I also want you to think about the role of follow-up stories in beat reporting. Now, this doesn't have to be a story that you worked on or that would have fallen into your original beat. I just want you to think about, this is a story that was published that existed in its time, but now things have changed since then. Who else might you want to talk to if you had the chance? What else puts it in context that's different than when it was published? So again, I've listed some places to look for giving you some tips on incorporating quotes. And some tips on following up the story. There's an annotated model in your book on page 320 and 321 that compares breaking news to a follow-up story, and that could be useful to you to try to think through how you approach a follow-up and who you're going to want to be talking to that's different from who people talked to when they originally when they originally wrote the story. Again, some of these requirements are the same as they were for our original pieces, and some of them are a little bit different. Again, you're going to be creating this article in WordPress. You're going to submit it to review for me when you're done, and you're going to work individually. Make sure you tell me who wrote it. You are still writing 600 to 900 words using AP style, and short paragraphs. Quotes are still driving the story forward, and we're still focusing and the impact on the AIC community. In this case, I want you to still include 3 news sources that talk about this topic. These sources can be your peers, faculty and staff, if contacted via phone or email, or it could be outside sources such as websites. So one of the sources does need to be something other than a website that was published. So it does need to be someone that you contact for an interview, or if it's not possible to secure an interview because of the current circumstances, then you can include 3 to 5 questions that you would have asked a specific person if you were physically on campus. And then you're going to think about where in the piece you would put the response to each of those questions. So that seems a little bit weird, so I'm just going to talk through an example. So you need 3 news sources. We're going to think about a story that was written about the dorms this past semester. So it's talking about the different housing options, some people choosing to live in the dorms, some people not choosing to live in the dorms. So you could have 2 articles that were written about, say, the housing situation in and around Springfield and housing prices. You could have a link to a piece that talked about income and effect of housing on student loans. But then, say for the 3rd interview, you need someone who is actually connected to the school. So in that case, the associate dean of student life would be a great person to contact. He would probably be able to tell you a lot about our students, our population, who lives in the dorms, and the challenges and joys of dorm life. But we are currently moving everybody out of the dorms right now, so he is probably slammed and, probably wouldn't be able to get back to you in a timely fashion. So that being the case, what you would do is you would think about those 3 to 5 questions. And then, again, you're going to be wanting to structure your story in such a way that you wouldn't just plop your entire interview with him into the middle of your piece, but you would be breaking your piece up based on different topics. So perhaps you would look at cost. And so you would ask him maybe 2 questions about how living in the dorms impacts people financially and financial aid. So those 2 questions would go in that area. And then maybe you're writing a section about kind of the social life of living in a dorm versus living off of campus. And maybe you were going to ask him 2 other questions about that. Well, then those 2 questions you would integrate further down. And then finally, maybe you would ask him about, his favorite experience of dorm life. And that could be something that you would either put at the beginning or the end. So you would think about what the questions are and where in your story they would go if you got your kind of perfect responses. So in that case, the actual finished story wouldn't be quote unquote finished because you wouldn't be able to get the answers to those questions, but you would indicate that you've thought about who are the important people to be talking about for this story. Who are the important people to reach out to, and what do you need to know from them in order to do a really good and effective follow-up that tells our readers what they need and what they want to know. And so it's more important that we understand who we would want to reach out to and about what in order to have a really good follow-up than perhaps our ability to actually get in contact with people given the current situation. So that's what I'm really getting at with that single source that has to be your own interview or the questions that you would ask. So I want you to be very intentioned about who you would be asking these questions and realizing why they would be really important to your follow-up. Again, you only need 1 image. It needs to be royalty free and is properly cited, or you can take it. And again, like the Yellow Jacket blog, you will need to think of 3 to 5 questions that you would have asked students in general about the topic if you were still on campus. So this is in addition to that one source that must be someone you interview or the questions. I know this one's a little bit more complicated, and I hope that that explanation makes it a little bit more clear. I just want to kind of offer some solutions to the fact that we may not be able to get in contact with the people that we would normally have access to or normally want to be able to reach out to. Kind of just being aware of everyone's situation right now, that everyone's really working overtime trying to make sure that we kind of get through things in as smooth of a process as possible, and that we kind of keep up as much normalcy as possible. And that means that some of our access to people isn't what we would like it to be, and also people are unfortunately getting sick. I would love to think that everybody is healthy, but I also know that may not be the case. And so some people may suddenly not be available for any number of reasons who normally would be. So I'm trying to kind of head off at the pass some common problems we might run into and kind of account for them before we run into them. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. And again, I hope that you've had a chance to read through the assignment and listen to this before we come together on Monday. And so then you can ask me any specific questions you have about these options. So again, overall, 2 assignments left. You can choose to do the same option for both of them, or you can try to do 2 different options, whatever you would like to do. And I look forward to reading what you guys come up with.